Thank you for agreeing to do this interview. The first question is, how can architecture be a catalyst for social change? And how can this happen in Iași? And if you have examples from your project, from your past projects, if you have seen their evolution and their impact that they had upon completion on the social fabric, let's say.
So I think there's always a lot of importance we give to architecture as a single profession. I think architecture can be a part of the change for the society. Architecture can actually plant the seeds with collaboration with other disciplines for the society to grow. And I think in Iași, what's very interesting for us, since we came and we've been deeply researching about the city, is how the history and the future of Iași is kind of working together, clashing at the same time, but in a way there's a certain relationship and codependency within that. And also the culture, there's a very vibrant young culture within the city that almost is kind of boiling to push that future, to push that culture to be the city to kind of really open up. So I think there is architecture can, in my opinion, architecture can only kind of plant the seeds, and the people are the ones actually that do change, that become the change, that become the kind of catalyst in a way. So I think it's in a way our role as architects to actually be open and to be able to kind of pick up on the nuances in the society and to plant the seeds within our design, people to take it on board. Hopefully, that's, I think, the biggest aim of us as designers.
We will not invent, we will not create a revolution as architects. We just need to be extra sensitive to pick up, what's out there, and maybe, as Deniz said, plant that seed. So we cannot expect architecture to change the world. I think that's naive. People will change the world, and architects are people, writers, it's all part of one big a society. And sometimes it's an extra burden to say that we will have to change the world. We have to make people's lives better. That's like one step at a time. And we have to be extra sensitive and receptive to what people are needing.
And maybe the one of the things that is very tangible is sustainable design. That is something that we can control. That is something we can use technology, we can use the tools we have to create a sustainable future. I think as architects, that's something we can really push within our profession.
But not environmental, like sustainability as a whole, ensuring that we make spaces that are that people can live in, that are socially sustainable, that are economically sustainable, that we make sure that these spaces can live on and be recycled to be used as something else, because we have, especially in Romania, you have such a huge amount of these blocks, right? These communist blocks. What are you going to do with them? Like, this is, for me, it's mind-boggling. Like,
we've been discussing this since we came here.
This is actually one of my questions. You have seen these communist housing, and what do you think the opportunities can be for their future?
If it's one, and two, you can respond. But the sheer volume, it's something that
it's an urban. I think it's an urban thing, urban question,
and a cultural thing. Yes, I suppose you can reuse them for the same function that they were used before, because I cannot really imagine that you start demolishing everything. But I suppose also you need to create some breathing room. So maybe you have to kind of
maybe it's in a way of eating out and kind of bringing the future, the kind of the visions that we are all talking about today, to kind of like take the skeletons of what it is, instead of kind of demolishing things, to really be able to reinvent. I think it would be really reinventing, instead of kind of turning everything into cultural spaces, which is almost like what people do. It's in a way to, instead of thinking of program, thinking of the structure, the bones, and then to really reinvent it as a integral part of society somehow.
But I suppose for that to happen, the emotional layer of what they represent has to also come off, because it's there, and it's
you need to be sensitive to kind of the emotions, the past. I think that's why Iași is a very interesting city, because there's so much depth there's so many layerings within the city that you kind of, you want to touch, but you can't, but you want, like it's a very interesting, that's why we had like this, it's filled with depth, the city, and it's very interesting for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sort of follow-up. You have built, you have projects both in the western part and in the eastern part of Europe. What differences do you see between these parts? How do you approach them like differently? How can maybe, because there is a gap between the two of them. They sort of have a different fiber.
I think the big difference, of course, in every place is different. You know, you cannot say Western Europe and Eastern Europe and say that they're. Every place is different. Amsterdam is different. Paris is different. Building a project in France is challenging. Greece is different. Turkey is. It's very complex. It's not East and West. But both of us come from Eastern Europe. So we do understand the challenges of wanting, let's say, a big, innovative international company coming and doing something great. We also understand that there is a resistance in the new, and resistance, whatever comes from somewhere else, because we are still, and maybe it's me, but I think we are all suffering a little bit from an inferiority complex to the West. And the way we are dealing with it is we're saying no, you know, don't come here because we're good enough.
But at the same time, I think there's a very interesting opportunity there, because openness to innovation is, when you look at the more developed West, it's quite rigid, everything. But then here, or if you go even more kind of east, openness to innovation, openness to new ideas, there's a hunger for it, which I think that's where the opportunity comes in, because you can really try to push things, you can really try to reinvent and kind of create new kind of meaning to things. So there's like, I think that's the opportunity where you have more of a freedom to really work with the culture, work with the fabric, work with the people, and to create new meanings in architecture and space.
The fact that it's kind of untouched so much by us, us meaning UNStudio and other more Western and more larger, let's say, international offices, that makes it so exciting, because it also allows us to be more free. And I think just by having like interventions by outside people would allow Romanian people and Eastern Europeans to rediscover what they can do themselves and how to appreciate what they have, see things differently, you know. And I personally am saying this coming from a place that is like this, so that's why I feel free to speak like this, because it would have been different if I were speaking like this being Dutch.
Totally feel you.
I feel you.
Another question that you can answer from a personal point of view and from the studio point of view. How do you go on approaching your creative process? Like, how do you go from nothing to a spark of an idea? Not the actual, but that spark that then fuels. And if you can, it's especially useful for, we have a faculty of architecture here in Iași, and it's especially useful for our students. This is like the hardest thing for them to do. And I think they'll be very curious on how do you get to this point?
Usually we start with what we cannot do. We need some sort of restriction, regulation, something, a puzzle. And if it's not there, we make it ourselves. I think that's usually the starting point. And the next step would be, apart from what is given like as a rule, let's say, what we need to follow, or as a brief, we try to analyze the space, the context, and analyze it like very rigorously, like data-based, like completely. Like, where's the wind coming from? Where's the sun coming from? What is the building going to shade? You know, what are the comfort elements? What are the areas that are not comfortable for you know, pedestrian level or higher up? So we create a base of data, of information,
And
that
then,
is not challengeable in a sense.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it's a creative process. So it's about getting that concept, and that concept is.
That concept then, I think, from the data is you kind of have almost like the groundwork done, and then then comes the concept, and the concept is very closely related to where you are, what you need to respond to. So we try to really understand where we are, because we do projects all around the world, and it's always like you have to put your mind into another hat, and then you really try to kind of understand what is the need. So then becomes, I think, our human-centric design approach, where we really want to not only as a performance, but as a core of the concept, the data, and the people as the center of the project, to really kind of combine the two layers together.
What distinguishes UNStudio, let's say, is not a formal language, is the story of a place. I think you can look through our projects and you will not find that any of them look similar. But what they all have as an underlying principle is a story. Every building has a story that is based on the place, that is based on the people, and that story becomes the concept of the building. And our goal always is that people that live in the buildings, use the buildings, can actually understand the story everywhere, from the smallest detail to the general planning.
And actually take it a step ahead, make it their own story. So this is like our ultimate goal. And with the data-driven design and then kind of really performance of the building, that actually strengthens that notion, because once you are comfortable, when you can live in a space that is kind of living and breathing, and you can really build up on it and make it your own. So it's in a way, in an intuitive, in a very analytical kind of layers put together.
But you know, to completely be honest, there is always that aha moment where you analyze, you get data, you get, you know, refactors, and you try to be rigorous, but all this kind of leads to an aha moment.
Do you have anything that helps you trigger that aha moment?
I think research and analyzing, looking at things, like getting all the input in.
Also, I think it's teamwork. With us, I think working as a team and everyone kind of putting their input together and then kind of really exchanging and developing together, that brings this, it becomes no one's design, no one's project. It becomes like our collective mind, our collective struggles, maybe even kind of, you know, like everything together. So it is like, as a team, it's nothing is one person's in a way. It's always like a collective approach. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.